Check. Yeah, your attention, please. Thank you. If you're looking for a seat, there's some seats over here on this side. There's some right down front. There are a few over this way. There's one whole table over here. Does not have anybody at it. And you're certainly welcome to sit in any of those spots. I'm delighted to have you here tonight. Kim is a friend of long-standing. His reputation as an architect goes before him and is well known throughout the South and even in the nation. And he is here simply to help us do some future planning. He is not here to help us build a building. He's here to help us decide what we need to do next. Let me give you an example. This floor has to be replaced. It was damaged. It's worn out. We have the money to replace it. We decided we did not need to put a tremendous amount of money into this floor, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 into the floor, and then 2 years down the road have to tear it up and put something else in. So we thought at the same time it would be very helpful to have Kim lead us through a process of looking where we want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, so that if we, for example, decided we wanted to have some parking, we didn't put it where a building 10 years down the road ought to go. So he's here simply to hear from you about what your dreams and visions are about the future of this congregation. And I'm going to turn it over to him. He'll facilitate even a period for you making comments or asking questions. So I turn it over now to a product of this congregation, Ms. Kim in.
Everybody here? Everybody here to the back? Over here? Wave. We're going to have fun, okay? Well, we're here too. We're going to have fun now. So we're going to have sort of a contest here too. We're going to see which side of the room makes the best positive comments. Good. Positive comments. And assertive and constructive and everything, okay? No grenades can be thrown because this is Methodist, right? We don't throw grenades, right? Well, we throw grenades when we need to. Yes. Thank you for having me here. This is a real treat. Michael and other members have said, you're so fortunate. I mean, this crowd, this is a huge crowd. I mean, I assume that means you're interested and you'd like to be involved. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about what are your potentials and possibilities. When you moved out to this site, wisely, there's a lot of land here. There's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of, you have a lot of different ways that you can use this piece of property. And so really what I want to do is not necessarily say, well, you should do this, or you should do that, or you got to do this, or you got to do that. That's really for you guys to decide. And really, it's a tough thing because how many people do you think are in this room right now? 350? I bet there's 500 opinions. What do you think? So, tonight is a chance for you to voice concerns or observations or things you're just mad about. That's okay, because if you don't tell people you're mad about something, they don't know that something doesn't work. Now we're talking about facilities here. We're talking about the buildings. Our church, this church, is more than it's more than the buildings, but the buildings can help or assist or whatever. So go to the next slide. And by the way, everything you're seeing tonight is going to be available in the church. We put it in the link up, okay? It's not a very long PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to just go over a few observations about your property, and also make sure that you take a chance to look at your facility and for us to just discuss some things that have really worked well. I mean, obviously this room is looking pretty well. But I hear on Sunday it's a little different event with the contemporary service and people trying to come back and forth. So that's the type of thing that I want everybody in this room to feel very open to discuss. Now, Michael has asked that if someone wants to make a comment, and I'm going to have a time that I want everybody to feel free to come. I want you to come up to one of the mics, one of the two mics. So, I've done this in the past where people just stand up in the audience and yell, something like, fix this, give us more parking, better, access, whatever. But tonight what we're going to do is I'm going to maybe tee up some questions and then have a period where you need to come up. And so be thinking about that. I'll go over the questions first and then ask that we come back to the questions and ask you to come forward and make a comment. Also, since this is going to be sent out to all of you, you may not want to comment tonight. You may want to comment to all. You may want to send it a letter or an email. That's okay. I love to talk and say something. But, my wife never does it. She'll say, well, I need to do that. She tells me that off the side. And people sometimes are a little shy about expressing opinions. I don't really want you guys to do that. Now, I want you to really look at the screen. It's a little hard to see. That's another reason you can get it online or there'll be another version available. So I want to point to a couple things. Of course, it's the same image on both slides. But basically, we're talking about your existing site and an overview. You have a great piece of property here, the church that works well. You've got existing facilities, and of course, those are the buildings, the structures, and the covered areas, playground. They're areas of concern and opportunity. That's where you folks have been here for several years. So is everything working perfectly? Probably not. It never does. All facilities have shortcomings, and they also have some things that work really well. What we don't want to do is miss the good things that are going on. One thing this church has, I think, is very successful. Is first, your narthex, where people sort of gather. It's kind of a crossroad, and I see a lot of heads nodding. I'm in Bellevue Methodist Church. We don't have a narthex. We would give our life for a narthex like this. And we just finished the design for the new Methodist Church in Franklin. And the key thing is an narthex, because they've been to your church. So they're like, we got to have one of those. So we're going to build one of those for them. In fact, that church is underway. And then strategy for the future, that's really just thinking about what could you do? What are some of the possibilities? This is a dream session in a way. And it's time to dream. And so don't go back. Let's go to the next slide. You've been here for a while. Incredibly flexible piece of property, very accessible, very visible. You have two entrances off a major highway and sheer access off this road. Next slide. A long time ago, somebody decided, well, let's have a Methodist church in Murfreesboro. They had to make some hard decisions, right? This is a church I grew up in. But the church is not there anymore. The church is here. The church is for the people. Someone had to make some important decisions about the growth of the church, its expansion, its success, its ability to serve. And, that worked well, and this worked well, and now you're in a different place. But, it's sometimes hard. Change is difficult. It just always is. Next slide. So now you're on this location, very visible. It's easy for people to give directions to this. You're easy to find. Next slide. Roll through these pretty quick. Just the images that you're very familiar with. There are no real obstacles in front of the church. Tremendous amount of land around it. Of course, the visual front of the church facing Thompson Lane. Working pretty good, right? Everybody knows where you are. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so let's look at the site a minute and talk about a few things. Obviously, this is your piece of property. And the church is right here. Now, go to the next slide. I want to point out, obviously, the connections, the roadway here and here. But, as far as investing in a piece of land, okay, you can hold there. There's things that work. Sorry, that's fine. No. There's things that work really well. You've got good access off the highway here to here. And you have drop-off points that are covered, and there's two of them, right? One's over the youth area, and one's over the administration area. Next slide. Now, these are the questions I'm going to pose, but I'm going to explore some things about your site and then come back to these questions, okay? So it's with three questions. I'm going to ask them about about both your site, when you come here to car or someone drops you off or whatever, what are the great things about your property? Like, is the playground working well? Is parking working well? Is circulation working well? So the questions would be, what are the best features of the site? What are the worst features of the site? Is something on your property not working right? I already know that parking is an issue, okay? But I've heard that, but I need probably someone in this room to say, yeah, parking is a real problem, okay? That would be maybe something that you would point out. And then areas of improvement. What would you like the property to do better? And that could be everything from more parking, more landscaping, to more walkways, to more shady areas, to more open areas. Anything like that? This is a time to think about it, plan for the future. Okay, next slide. Now, just a couple of things before we go back to the site, before we have questions. You've got access areas, but then you have things, it's decision, places where people have to make a decision. When they drive on the site, they got to decide, where am I going to go, where am I going to park? The first decision they face coming this way is pulling here. Of course, a lot of people will come to the drop-off located here, and then they will kind of stack up, particularly if the weather's bad. They kind of stack up, right? And there's room for maybe one car. The other decision location is here to pull into the parking. Same thing on the road here, they have to decide, come in, and at this point decide whether to drive straight or drive around to the parking. When I came here tonight, of course, and I pulled in this road, I couldn't continue to this point because there were little guard things off of the children's area. Why is that? Because there's little people there, right? So what looked like a very obvious transportation pathway that people would follow into the church maybe needs to be rethought. The other entrance is the back entrance, and originally that was proposed to have a covering on it, like the other two entrances. But if you notice on the plans, which we've got some versions of that are colored, it says the canopy was deleted. Okay, it was probably deleted for money reasons, right? Okay, and someone had to make that decision a few years ago. Was that a good decision or bad decision? No. Should you put the canopy on there now? Maybe, maybe not. Here are your floor plans. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the site a second, and I really would like you then to just voice some concerns. So go back one slide. Now go back, and let's stay on this, okay, as a slide. This is your site plan. Okay, someone tell me, and come up to the mic, what is the best thing about your site, or what is the worst thing? It really doesn't matter what your opinion is. It could be that you want to just express a concern or whatever. Please come forward and tell me or tell us, because this is information we're going to document. What's the best thing about your site? What's the best thing? Come on, there's got to be someone that has an observation.
It's open.
It's what?
Clearly visible.
It's clearly visible. That's great. Okay. Which means it's safe, right? There are no hidden spots. Good observation. What else? And we might just take things from the audience and I'll just repeat them if that's okay. That way you don't have to come up. You know. What's another observation? What? Oh, that's really interesting. It was a gift. The site was a gift. Pretty good gift too, right? 20 acres, right? I wonder what the property is worth these days. Nice investment. Church. What's another observation? Okay, how's parking work? Is it good? I heard a no. I heard a no. I heard another no. Parking. How's the parking work?
Difficult to get out and talk onto.
Difficult to get out.
Because of the traffic.
Because of the traffic. Now, is it difficult to get out because there are too many people trying to leave, or it's difficult because there's too much traffic on Thompson Lane?
Too much traffic on Thompson Lane.
Both. Okay, I heard both. Does anybody agree with that? I see a lot of heads nodding. Okay, young lady over there, has observations. Say that again one more time. Okay, and I think I heard you say you like it arrangement because you can drop off at different locations, right? There's not just one entrance, and in fact, really, it's kind of interesting when you look at, there's an entrance on one side, the west side, there's an entrance on the east side, there's an entrance on the south. There's actually other entrances, most of the ones right into the narthex, but they're kind of in a corner, so I usually don't see them being used very much. What's another thing about this site? Do you like the landscaping? Okay. You want to cut down the trees? I'm kidding. Okay, so would you like more trees? Not a strong yes, okay. Oh, okay, well, see, that's what I gotta do, see, you get people. I'm gonna ask you something, I need a response, because otherwise I'd leave and say, go get the chainsaws, nobody cares, okay? Not gonna do that. What else about the site? Is there enough parking? When's that a real problem?
Sunday morning.
When it shouldn't be a problem, right? Do you hear people really complain about it? People turn away because there's not enough parking? I'm sorry, what?
Parking, the handicap parking.
The handicap parking needs to be increased. Okay, that's an observation. All right, what else about the site? Is it lit properly at night? Is it safe at night? I see somebody. The west side of the church is not lit well enough at night. Everybody agree with that? First, now that it's, daylight longer, you sort of forget those things. But in the middle of the winter, they're going to be spooky, right?
Well, if you're here, until the parties will go out after choir rehearsal, at home month, not real.
Not real safe.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. What else about the site? Too much open land, land we're not using. Anybody agree with that? Everybody agree with that? Anything else?
I think we've got great land that the youth and the children like to use. So I hope we don't take away too much.
Well, if we don't take away from
Land.
open space. Okay, so open space is quality. You like that? Okay. Someone else over here? Well, listen, let's move on to the building a second, and we'll come back to the site if we need to. Remember, this is one of these things where, as we're talking about your facilities, your site, and buildings, something may occur to you later, like, oh, I forgot to mention the mechanical system or the dumpsters or whatever. It's always, we're exploring a lot of different things. Let's go to the next slide.
Tim,
Over back. The best thing is you have options.
we're not making options, we do.
Not then. All right. Yeah. Okay. I don't know, that's usually a transformer, and sometimes an electrical issue with the utility company, I don't know. So I'm sorry, what the observation was that there is a transformer unit that is very visible. Is that fair to say? It's very visible and not shielded.
Tim, does everyone realize that our property ends on the south side just behind? We have all that open land, but that's not ours.
Right, that's good. Go back one slide. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Our land is on the west side.
Your property, there's actually room here on the south side for another row of parking, but here's your property line that goes over here. I'll go to that second. That's good. When you see the aerial, it's deceptive because there's a big field further back, but that's not part of your, that's not part of your. Yes, maybe to the west, right? It's all this area here. Big piece of land. Yes.
They may just take one of those leaves or two or three out, and they've been transplanted right over here. but we had to totally around that box.
Okay.
The department said, oh, you have to take these out, so 3 of them were removed.
Okay, that's a clarification. So there's a utility issue. And everybody, you gotta remember, whatever with utilities, sometimes in their code issues, you just gotta follow them. You have to try to do the best job you can, whatever. Any other site things? Well, let's move on to facilities. This is going okay? Does everybody feel comfortable with the discussion? Okay? Any other concern? Let's go to the building. I want to sort of talk to, first, you've seen floor plans. I want to take you through a sort of a different image of the floor plans. Go to the next slide. And that is to put some color on them to show the difference between where you sort of walk in hallways and then where the classrooms are located, administrative offices or other functions. And you know your facility really well, but they're just observations I want to make. Of course, you have an entrance here through the administration area. We're in this space, which is really a large open space. It's also kind of a hallway to other spaces. I mean, in order to get to fellowship hall, you have to walk through the gym. Or from the children's area over here, you have to walk through the gym to get to fellowship hall. There's your narthex, there's the openings, the 2 other, I think what we're going to see is the main entrances to your church. Next slide. Going upstairs, of course, one of the issues that was made very clear is there's not handicap accessibility for the youth upstairs. That's correct. And so there are several ways to solve that. One would be add an elevator or whatever. But the reason that's the case is this is an open space. There's no elevator back here. Of course, the elevator here serves, the 2 levels of your building, and there's the opening in the narthex and the opening in the sanctuary. Also, there's not handicap accessibility to upper parts of the sanctuary, the upper level of the sanctuary. Right? Okay, next slide. Okay, so what are the best features of your facility? What are the worst? What are areas of improvement? Now, before we go to that, I'm going to show you a few diagrams, little teasers. Okay, let's go to the next slide. One is the fact that you have 5 major entrances. They're used completely different ways. Okay, and I'll bet 60% of you come in this door. Is that true or not? No. Okay, so we're having a picture. Okay, I'm going to try them hands. Okay. I want you to raise your hands if you use this entrance, which is the one into the administrative area. Raise your hands if you use that as the main entrance. Okay? Oh, wait a minute. That's a great clarification. Let's talk about it. You're coming to church. You're coming to come here on Sunday, and you use this entrance. Raise your hand. Okay, really, it's interesting because the left side of the room, from the other side of the room, is the other side. Okay, so now let's try this. Okay, how many of you use this entrance as your main entrance on Sunday? Okay, so you guys move out. Go out that door, and y'all can leave. Now, who uses this entrance? Raise your hand. Okay, now it takes to be well. It's a good mixture. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is that on the first floor is kind of into the children's area, and as we all know, there are kind of issues about accessibility right into that hallway that sometimes may not be so good, right? But is that true? I mean, that's kind of a concern. Now, how many people use this entrance, which is right into the narthex? How many people in this room use it? Raise your hand. Okay. What? Okay, how many people use this entrance, which is where you've got the little pull around the front? How many people use that? A few people. Well, see, in a way, for me, that's good to hear because I don't think that was intended. I think the intention was that these 2 entrances would be really used because they've got you've got an airlock, a vestibule, and you've got big doors, right? Very spacious doors. They're glass. They're very open. They're hard to open. Right? That's an observation. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. But here's something that I want you to make sure you're aware of. This is the number of entrances and exits you really have. It's a lot. Right? And maybe it's because you have safety of children and the church. is next to a hospital, a church is one of the most important things for fire safety, because if there's a problem, you've got a lot of people, it's called assembly, and assembly fire code rates, you got to get people out very quickly. That's why movie theaters are very, they're carefully watched by fire administrators. And that's one of the reasons you have these entrance there, really more exits than entrances. You have lots of, and you have exits from the fire stairs here that you probably don't even know exist. There's a stair behind that wall, and there's an exit that goes right outside, even though it's probably not, you don't want it propped open, you don't want people to use it. Okay, next slide. And then upstairs, you also have the same issue of the access. The classrooms on the upper level, these are adult classrooms, my understanding, right? In the west wing. Those are children, older children on the upper level. Okay. But if they go down the stair here, they're down in the kids area, the young kids area, right? And so that's kind of a circulation concern. Now, the youth have 2 stairs, okay? And which one's the main stair? Get up there. Okay, wait a minute, which one? That one? Okay, not that one. Okay, do you even use that stair?
Yes.
Okay, but it's kind of confusing, right? You're not sure which is the way to get up there. But there's no handicap accessibility, right? Okay, now let's move next slide. No, go back to the question slide. Right there, okay. What are the best features of the building? I'm going to start by saying I think your narthex is wonderful as far as the facility goes. Tell me what else is a really good thing with your facility. No steps. Okay. The acoustics are good. Oh, wait, there's clarification. The acoustics are good in the sanctuary. Are they good throughout the church?
No.
Right. So they're good in some spaces, but not everywhere. Give me an example where the acoustics are not good.
In here.
What
In here. What? In here.
I know what you mean. The acoustics in here. That's partly because this is designed as a gymnasium, and now it's a little bit more than a gymnasium. That makes sense. Okay, what's another good thing about it, or bad thing about your facilities? You can get in during inclement weather. Okay, they're 2 covered areas. Right, it's pretty easy to get under cover quickly. Okay. It is accessible, right? And of course, that's really new facilities that meet all.
The railings in the sanctuary on the balcony, front row, they're too low. They don't want people sitting on the front row of the sanctuary on the balcony.
Okay, everybody hear that? Their balcony, front row seats is
Can I comment about those rails?
okay.
They were designed specifically to be that low for appearance purposes. The only reason why we don't place people there is for additional safety purposes.
Okay.
They meet standards and codes.
Okay. Thank you. And that's a very possible. Psychologically, sometimes something can comply with codes, but you kind of go, feel a little weird about it. So. Yes, sir.
This is a very minor point, but if you sit at the back of the church, the door hardware on the door entrances to the sanctuary is awful.
It's awful.
It's very noisy.
It's noisy. Okay.
I don't often sit at the back of the church unless I'm pushing, so give me a break on that. But the hardware meets code, and I understand all that kind of stuff. It's very, very noisy, and people have to be leaving during the service on Sunday.
Okay, so the observation was the hardware is more likely to back the church.
That was a budget cut. Originally designed to have internal hardware, and that was a budget cut.
Okay. There's a budget cut, and that's often the case. What type of hardware, what
one problem we had when we were trying to figure out a new schedule was that the classrooms on either side of this room are completely unusable if there's a service going on in this room because the sound thing. So that's a complaint.
Okay, did everybody hear that? When there's a service going on here, it's hard to use because of the sound or whatever. Yes, next. Somebody over here? All right, Well, look over here. Yes?
One of the best features of the choir is the excellent practice facilities we have downstairs and the elevator that some of us need to get to so we can still be a part of the choir.
So that works well. Practice space choir works well. How's the piano in that room?
Which one?
The little baby grand.
The one
Is it okay? It's in good hands. Thank you. I'm so glad it's in good hands. Yeah, I'm really honored it's in good hands. Okay. Come on, let's go. What else is great? To the back.
Insufficient, there's no storage space.
Storage space. Oh, okay, yeah. Most people say that they never have quite enough storage and they have to. So is that storage space? Now, where is that the issue? Is that the issue here? Is that the issue everywhere? Or?
If you look at any stairwell or area, the kitchen stuff is stuck where it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, if you didn't hear what he says, there's stuff in stairwells, used as storage, by the way, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to put stuff in the stairwell, it's where it's not, so it is what it is. Okay, well, what else?
The sign at the front of the church is only visible from one entrance, we're coming one way, when we go to where our service is on, or what's going on, you don't see it, you're coming in from Memorial.
Okay, repeat that, it's the observation of signage or what?
Yeah, the sign at the front where we can post what's going on and change the message is only visible, you can interpret that way, interact out there.
Okay, so the informational signage is orientation is only one direction. And you got people, I guess you've got people coming from both east and west, right? How many people come from the east side of town, right there? On the west side. Okay, I'm going to come from the west side. The other side. I mean, wait a minute. If you're coming from Lebanon Road, maybe, raise your hand. Lebanon Road, maybe. Okay, if you're coming from Constant Lane over near where TV used to be, right? Okay. That's right. Okay. South, okay, if you come from the south, yeah. Is it? From south. That's a good number. Okay, now, back to the facility. What about the narthex? Narthex work pretty well? Any shortcomings there? How about classrooms? Do you have enough classrooms? I would assume that you're growing and you're a successful church, so, yes?
I have a comment about this room in particular, but on Sunday mornings, people have to go through this room.
Yes?
As one of our concerns. When there is worship happening in here, people have to go through here either to get to the parking lot in the back or to get to a Sunday school class that's meeting or coffee.
Yep.
Or if they're arriving, they come through here.
I'm going to note that in a minute about the fact that you have a room that's hyper successful. It's hyper flexible, it's hyper multi-use, like off the charts, because it's used for so many different things. And with that comes some real shortcomings. Note one. It's also a hallway, right? It's a connection between one whole side of the church and the other, and you got to walk through the room. Okay? Anybody over here? Yes?
Other than the narthex stairs, all the other stair accessibility is very tight. Usually it's only like single fog going one direction up or down.
You know, that may be a consequence of the fact that there's so many exits that each of them only had to be a certain width wide. So you have a lot of exits, but they're all just kind of barely, per code. Whereas it could have been if the stairs were a little more generous. That's just, I know that's sometimes the way a resolution like that is fixed. But did everyone hear that over here? It was the observation that some of the stairs, other than the main narthex stair, which is really not a fire escape, that's something called a monumental stair. That's just for convenience. Over here.
Hello, I'd like to point out that the fellowship hall is also hyper-successful and faces a lot of the same issues that this room does. That's a main entrance to our building, and there are Sunday school classes held in there, so it becomes a hallway. And it's almost impossible to have an event going on in the fellowship hall and here at the same time, because that's an entrance to the building.
Okay, that observation of the fellowship hall is also an entrance and a hallway. And of course, if you left the narthex and headed through here, went through the back entrance, you gotta go through the fellowship hall, so it's a good observation. Keep going, yes?
The church is very beautiful, and I would hate to lose any of the aesthetics of the outside. Even when we see it on the blueprint, we see the shape of the cross. I love how the aesthetics are so beautiful and pleasing.
Okay, the aesthetics are beautiful and pleasing. Over here.
I think the kitchen facility is quite an asset to the church.
Kitchen facility. Let's get Mr. Huddleston demanded that it would be, right? And, right, Ms. Gibb? I know, that's why I said that. Ms. Gibb, for those of you who don't know, I grew up next door to Kim and George Huddleston. I remember Mr. Huddleston was one of the kitchen guys, right? Okay, what other observation about the kitchen? Is there enough storage in it? Okay, what about, is it flexible enough? Is it the serving room work pretty well? Okay. Not many complaints about the kitchen, so how about the fellowship hall space? Does it work pretty well? No misbehaving in the back room now. What about the fellowship hall? Does it work pretty well? Accommodates activities? Could it be larger? Okay, go ahead.
I've noticed that these bathrooms get used for storage more so than they do maybe bathrooms, especially if we have events going on in here, like the Valentine's supper. That space in the bathrooms is not adequate for accessing the stage.
Okay. And the stage is not handicap accessible, is it? And that's, so did everybody hear that about these spaces on the side being less, maybe not used to the level they could be? What other observations? Hallways, are your hallways wide enough into the church? The hallways wide enough? Classrooms are big enough? You just need more of them? Do you need more big classrooms or more small classrooms? That's a good problem to have. I'm sure you have classes where smaller groups are more important than some of the larger. Okay, any other observations about your facility? Yes?
The air conditioning is upstairs.
Okay.
There are 5 rooms, and the thermostat is in the furthest room, and the other rooms either freeze or burn.
That's called control of HVAC systems. So the observation was made over here, you didn't hear that the controlling rooms, some rooms are hot and they should be, and some rooms are cold. And that may be due to thermostats or the location or balancing of the system. That's a good observation. Any other observations? Yes, ma'am. Sound system in the narthex. Now, do you mean sound system or just acoustics?
But anyway, I'm thinking the sound system, something I can do.
Okay, what she's mentioning is the sound system in the narthex may need some. Right, we have events in the narthex. Okay. Well, that's, listen, you know who's authority? Everybody sitting in this room, okay? Right? Really, that's why we're doing this. You're the authority because you're the user. Yes?
I'll address that. There is a volume control on the wall. Turn that up and turn it down. It's over in the corner, like closer to where the welcome desk is. Okay. So it's more quality than it is volume. Okay. I have one concern as pastor of Inviting Ministries. We have sometimes as many as 120 guests who come here on Sunday mornings, and their ability to find coffee time for guests is is really very limited.
Okay, you're right, you hear that? But-
So we have for many years talked about our need to have a more centrally located coffee time that a guest could find on their own without having to go to the welcome desk and ask where it is and have somebody escort them all the way down the swing. So we need a more centrally located place for that.
Okay. What other observations? Shoot, chance. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, the west entrance is the only main entrance that does not have a vestibule, and that being the entrance to the preschool. I believe having a vestibule would, one, add security to the preschool program, and also reduce drafts, which you can feel all the way here in the gym sometimes with the door open.
Okay, so what he said, if you heard, is that the west entrance, since it doesn't have a vestibule, there's a problem with the winter when you open the door, it breezes. Everybody agree that's see a lot of nodding heads in the room. Now, of course, that's a real challenge because of the children's area anyway. I mean, I think that may be something that's going to be a high on the priority list because of safety for children and how people are taking them. Over here, yes.
I think the insulation as it applies to the walls between these two rooms is probably not designed for the kind of services being conducted down in this particular room.
Okay, now, the sound insulation, right? Sound insulation for this room and maybe other parts of the church is not sufficient to handle what's now occurring in inspection. Is that fair saying? Everybody agree with that? Is that okay? Someone over here, yes.
The honeybee classroom in this hallway doesn't have an exterior door, and usually rooms that hold children should have an exterior door, if we're making a list.
Right, and in fact, that's always an issue, a challenge, because you've got to provide exiting, a different type of level of exiting for rooms with little kids, to get them out very quickly. That's why you have so many doors on the education. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'd like to see restrooms in the fellowship hall area.
Okay, the restrooms are mainly just off an arc, right? And these here, right? Okay. Okay.
Also, I think the narthex could be expanded to such, there are certain times of the year we have a lot of fundraisers, we don't have enough places to put people, to have, things that we're raising money for. It could be a coffee area and so forth and so on, if that's possible. It's a multi-use area, it's excellent.
Okay, everybody hear that the narthex could be maybe expanded or be made to be used more for different activities, better, larger, more spacious or whatever, okay? And you have, yes, ma'am?
It could be a chapel for small weddings and small funerals, and it's cut due to budget concerns, also things. But for this size church, when we can afford to pay for it, we need a chapel.
Okay, the observation was that there was originally designed a chapel plans and that was cut out, and so, I think it's, I won't paraphrase, but because of the size of your church, maybe a small worship area for a small wedding, for funerals, whatever might be appropriate. Okay, anybody else have any comments on that? Let's also hit some. What?
I agree with her. I agree with her.
Okay. All right. Go back here, okay?
So the one feature that I really appreciate about our church is its ability to house different forms of worship in different spaces at the same time. I think that's a big feature in the same building, right? That's a big feature of our church.
Okay, if everybody heard, it's an asset that you can have different types of worship in the building at the same time. Over here, yes, sir.
Instead of a dry fire suppression system, we have a wet fire suppression system. I know I spent Christmas Day here.
There's an observation about the fire sprinkler system, which, you have some choices that are cost issues if you've got wet system, which means there's water and pipes. So, okay.
Sometimes it stays in the pipe.
What?
Sometimes it stays in the pipe.
You want the water to stay in the pipe, not any other issues here? Okay. This has been great feedback. I'm going to move on to a few things, but then we'll be wrapped up. Is that okay? Everybody feel comfortable with what we talked about? Yes? What about a columbarium in the future? Okay? Columbarium. We have one that we put in a Valdez, and it's been very, okay. Now, people keep these from A. Right? What else? Any other final comments about your facilities? Oh, a columbarium. A columbarium is where ashes would be placed with a name, and it's usually sort of an outdoor setting, so you could go in front of the lake. And if you want to see one, there's one. I think there's one at West End Methodist, one at our church. The Episcopal Church has one here too, and Presbyterian. So, columbarium. Okay, thank you. Columbarium, I think, is the word, but I'll look it up in the architectural dictionary when we get back. I'll leave it there. Yes.
One thing certainly would be a space for our modern services.
Space for what?
Space for our modern services. New building, whatever it takes. I know we own it, but that's also something I think we really need. And if this room were completely empty, we could get many Sunday school classes in here. So this is just, I wonder how we set our priorities.
Well, if you didn't hear the first part, Mrs. Mike wasn't on, she was asking a fundamental question. How do you establish priorities? And it's hard because, everybody's got kind of thing, well, I like this, or I like that, or I like something else. Usually the strategy we would do is to share with you maybe some possibilities, and then maybe prioritize things, wants and needs, and also the costs associated with it. Because, one issue, you may be able to fix some things in a less expensive way, but you may have to, you may have to really do a pretty good fundraiser to do, say, a space for modern worship. One of the things I think you've been lucky is you do have multiple uses of some of your spaces. Well, let me then, any other observations? Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful church. There's sun and me. There's sun and what is beautiful, I think, is house.
Okay, and I didn't get quiet because of my ears. It's okay, that's why we have a mic. Yeah. Maybe she said, we have any most beautiful church emergency. There's something bigger.
We have the most beautiful church in the world. They are sun that are big. They are sun that are enormous. But we think that at this point, in what we have, it is absolutely beautiful. It's conducive to what we come to church for, which is to worship the Lord, not to be the most comfortable, not to have luxurious, but to worship the Lord.
Well said. That's pretty good. I think, the folks that worked very hard to get this church here and have to raise some money, guys, you had really good leadership and you had good contributions. And now you're sitting with success, okay? And with success brings some other challenges. Okay, I'm going to roll through a few things to get you out of here, okay? Is this going okay? What other comment?
I'm sorry, I just had one thing, and it was just a safety issue with the preschool. A lot of preschool parents may not be here tonight, may not be members of the church, but about 127 children plus Mother's Day out, little short people are dropped off at that entrance every day. And so the way that the traffic flow is a major concern, hence the cones. There's a lot of parking in the back, and it's difficult to access if you're coming from the west. And when church dismisses, that's where all the young families leave. Again, lots of short people, so it can be a safety issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because the road distinctly goes under, the main road goes right under the portico share, that's where. Well, one more, okay.
Tim, you know, these are good issues, but you know, the realization someday we're going to have to add on to this church. It's growing very rapidly. And I think somebody needs to look into the fact that maybe we could swap the city, take this property back here and swap it to that property over there that we own. This back here is supposed to be for recreation. I doubt the city will ever put recreation back there because it's next to a major road that goes through there. So I think the big issue someday is we're going to have to make a petition to this church. Which way are we going to go? My opinion, we need to go that way.
All right. Let me finish up. Go to the next slide. Okay, so areas of concern. And, you know, it's kind of funny because I've jotted these down because I've heard some of them, but what today is expanding on this list. The gym floor is a known thing, you got to replace it, right? And security of children, handicap access to youth areas, it's really a code violation. More classrooms, growing succession, limitation of the contemporary service, right? That's what we've heard. And then parking. Parking is always a problem, right? Next slide. Okay, so the gym has become super successful. It's a gymnasium, it's a presentation space, it's your dining hall, it's a meeting room, it's a large reception space, and it's a contemporary worship space. You know, congratulations, good. But what's the problem with it? It's also a hallway, right? That's what, right? Is that what I heard? It's a hallway. You can't use this place for contemporary worship and people going back and forth, whatever. Or when you're having contemporary worship, you're affecting circulars. Next. Okay, so look, here's just, these are not ideas, that's just possibilities or areas that should be explored. You've got parking, here, this is the red line, this is your setback line, building setback line in your property. You've got parking areas here, you've got parking areas here, you have parking that was planned around the periphery here. Now, what you were mentioning, Mr. Moser, of course, we just go back in this direction if there's a land swap available, if that's an opportunity. The other would be to utilize the land directly to the west for parking or for expansion. That's just possible. One thing that I showed here, though, is that you really don't want to mess with the fact the church has prominence on the street. You don't want to put parking. I don't think you want to put parking in front of the church, do you? Everybody's like, no. However, you could have a connector road there that would allow, movement across your, just for cars, and you can put low landscaping, nobody would ever notice there. It's just an idea. Next. Expansion. Okay, well, you can expand in a lot of different ways. You could go to the south. You could go one direction. You could fill in this corner. I don't think you'll take the children's playground because you'll have a revolt. But that is an area for expansion. If the children's area moved to a different area, that would be an area for expansion. You could move directly west. This is certainly a large area for expansion. You could move in this direction, move in this direction. There's been the observation of the cross thing, the shape of the church. I think that is a strong factor. But in expansion, there may have to be a compromise on exactly how it is. You actually didn't build an absolute balanced church across anyway. It's a little longer on one side than the other. Does that matter? I don't think that matters. It's fun. But those expansion options are pretty good. Now, some expansions would mean you had to replace parking in another area, or you could just add parking for the interim. I do think that these two main entrances are underutilized, and any parking strategy might encourage people to use those entrances. There's a lot of money invested in those entrances, and I very rarely see them used. Next. Okay. I'll leave you with one funny idea, and it's just an idea, and that's to fix the circulation issue here. I'm not doing any expansion options, planning options, because you made a clever observation. We have to, as a group, you have to make priorities of what you want. And that would be the next step. And the next meeting would be to start to assemble what you really want, what are the priorities. What do you really need as opposed to what do you want and what to fix it. This is an idea about how to fix this issue with the youth. Everybody has said, oh, this said the youth stair, is this stair used over here? Right? Okay, not that. Okay, and you've got everybody comes into fellowship hall, but they got to go through fellowship hall, through the gym to get to the narthex, right? Okay, this is just an idea. If you don't like it, just throw it away, but I thought it's an example of something, a very subtle addition that might fix it. Next slide. And that is to build a connector between the narthex area, a connector that is on the other side of this wall. It is two-level connector, and it leads from the narthex all the way back around this space, around this gymnasium space, and connects over to Fellowship Hall here. And it may actually extend even further. But what that allows is you can go from the narthex to the Fellowship Hall without going through the gym. And you could go from the narthex into the gym. And this is the most interesting thing is, here's your elevator, right? Go to the next slide, and this is the upper level. The upper level, there's an elevator. So instead of building an elevator down here, this connector on the upper level allows people in the entire second floor of the church, the main proper church, to get through this hallway into the youth area here. And this hallway could be like a gallery or a colonnade. You'd want to do it very nice. It faces east, so the light would be good. You would have to maintain those two doors out of this space because it would be an exiting space on this level. But that would allow you to actually maybe go outside in that direction and come in here, and you can go back and forth to the upper level without adding an elevator. It's just an idea. I thought I'd throw it in. You obviously have some hard thinking to do and some contemplation. Go home and think about this, and then write down your thoughts and send them to Michael and Mary and others. And thank you so much for the opportunity to help guide you. You've got a lot of potential here. And you've got a lot of flexibility. That's good, and that's also sometimes tough because you could go this way, there, and sort of together we're going to have to, get our arms around this thing and see how we're. But congratulations on your success. Thank you for listening.
Jay, it's okay to leave. Thank you for coming.
I just